We've reached the month of May, which brings us to the opening weekend of fishing officially. It brings us to, we're getting close to Mother's Day. It's also the high point, or ramping up rather, of the track season. You know, track was something I enjoyed in high school, and it was always an exciting time when May came around because we were thinking of, you know, conference coming up and regionals and trying to make it to state. But there's this story about one particular track athlete named Derek Redmond. Derek was a British runner. He was in the 1992 Summer Olympics in Barcelona. Derek was best at the 400-meter dash. 4 years prior, in 1988, he had just about to begun the 400-meter dash in the previous Olympics when he tore his Achilles tendon right before the race, an hour before. So now 4 years later, here he is, all healed up, ready to go. He was expected to win the gold medal because in the trials he was among the top. And as the race began, Derek Redmond got off to a great start. The race was looking good for him. This was the semifinal. So if he placed in the top two, he'd make it to the championships and have that chance at the gold. But 200 meters into the race, the unthinkable happened to Derek. The crowd saw him suddenly reach back and grab his leg. He came to a sudden halt, fell to the ground. He had torn his hamstring. The race was over for him. The other runners quickly ran past. His season was over, of course, and very much probably his career. Because to come back from that sort of injury at his age would have been very difficult. But something within Derek started to stir. He realized, at least in this moment, he wasn't completely done. He rose to his feet and began painfully hopping, stumbling his way around the track for the next 100 meters. The crowd was, to say the least, quite amazed. There are times in our lives when we stumble and fall, whether making some mistake, saying the wrong thing to somebody, hurting a relationship, maybe losing a job, failing at something in school, or falling in our relationship with God, right? We sin, we fall. But then there comes a point to decide, will I get up and stumble forward, or will I stay on the ground defeated? It's sort of like what happened in the early church over and over, but we see one story in our first reading today. There was this big issue going on. They had fallen, stumbled away from the type of charity that Jesus had called them to. Here's what happened. These two groups of widows, one was Jewish, one was Greek. The Christian community was caring only for the Jewish widows who had become Christian, right? And they were neglecting those widows of Greek background, and they were starving. When the apostles heard about this, they were very much cut to the heart, right? That wasn't good of our community to be neglecting these people. So when they realized it, what did they do? Did they just stay down there on the ground? No, they got up, gathered in prayer, and sought a solution. And in the end, the Holy Spirit led them to ordain deacons to make sure that all were cared for with equal attention. In the gospel too, another example, Thomas and Philip. They find themselves at this point of darkness, of misunderstanding, really. They couldn't comprehend what Jesus meant by all this Oh, I will prepare a place for you. Where I am going, you know the way. Stuff. How could they know the way if they didn't know where Jesus was going? You can imagine the confusion. They had been following Jesus for a couple of years, and at this point they had to admit, what is the point? They had to admit they realized that they didn't know what the end goal was. Maybe you and I find ourselves in that situation sometimes, in that spot. I'm going to Mass all my life considering myself a follower of Jesus, but do I deep down grasp my purpose in God? As Jesus heard their questions and saw their confusion, he was very likely cut to the heart himself. And we can see that based on his passionate response to their questions. See, Thomas and Philip didn't stay on the ground in their misunderstanding and in their despair, but they kept going to Jesus. And Jesus met them right there, and he answered. They went to Jesus, who says, I am the way, the truth, and the life. The way, the truth, and the life. The thing is, life is always better when we stumble on the way, capital W, the way of truth, than to stay on the ground held down by lies, which would lead us to despair. And what do I mean by lies? I mean this. If you ever have a thought that comes to mind, like, there's no hope for me, I'm too far gone, I can never live a holy life, I'm unlovable, I'm forgotten, I'm alone, I'm ugly, I'm unforgivable, I'm a failure. All these things are lies from the enemy, who would wish very much to hold us down right there. But they're not true. Jesus, who is the way, the truth, and the life, wants to bring us on the way to the truth and fullness of life. He reveals to us that God the Father is very much cut to the heart when he sees us held down like that. This is truly the will of the Father who looks upon us. His will is that we would get back up. And he always gives enough grace to get back up. Through Jesus, the Father shows us how much he loves us. Now, Saint Therese of Lisieux is my favorite saint. This is the Carmelite who died at 24, and in her writings really changed the world. She knew this well. She had this idea, this image she thought about of a toddler learning to walk. Right? A toddler's learning to walk, walking towards her mother or father, and she's not so upset when she falls down. I saw this the other day. I was with my nephews, and the younger one, he's crawling really well, and he's got enough strength where he can kind of start to get up, but then he falls down, and he's not too upset. He's not disappointed with himself. St. Therese says it's kind of like that. And another thing, we mustn't get too upset when we fall down, but St. Therese said, well, even if we do fall down, thinking about the toddler, if the kid falls kind of hard, she can never fall so far as to get injured, because being that little, you're not that tall, right? The ground's not that far away. And so it is with us as children of God. God who is almighty, we who are so small. That's a good thing. Yeah, St. Therese said, even if she were to fall and be unable to find any strength to get up, she knew at the very least the Father would be cut to the heart, would quickly bend over and lift her up. And so it is with us and God the Father. So back to Derek Redmond. So he suffers this injury 200 meters in, and he's hobbling along for the next quarter of the track, and he's hopping around, and the crowd is very moved, right? But there's one person in the stadium who's most moved. And this one person is so moved that he gets up, he races down the stairs to the track, he pushes through the security, pushes through the medical staff, the coaches and other athletes, and he starts running up the track the other way towards Derek. And this man gets to Derek, and he gets close to him, and he puts his arm around his son. And Derek looks there at his dad, just sobbing in agony, and he puts his head on his dad's shoulder, and together they make their way all the way to the finish line. If Derek would have simply won the gold medal that year in 1992, it would have been well forgotten by now. But instead, God used this to show forth his love for us. Brothers and sisters, God's love for us and our value isn't so much in how many times we get knocked down. God always loves us. And that will never change. But God's glory is our getting back up with him and stumbling on the way. On the way, who is Jesus Christ himself, who will always bring us to the Father.